Hello and welcome to the podcast, Widening the Circle, a Sacred Story. So we're your hosts. I'm Sky Williams-Tao and I use they, them pronouns.
And I'm Jamelia Omar. I use she, her pronouns.
And today we're joined by the Reverend Sarah, which is really exciting. And more generally in this episode, we're discussing the theology section of the report. And to do that, we're considering the question, to what are we bound? So as I mentioned, we're being joined by Reverend Sarah. And so to get to know Reverend Sarah a little bit, we're going to do a round of answering questions and image descriptions. So our little get to know you question is, what is your UU elevator pitch? So the idea of this one is, if you're in an elevator and you're talking about your faith, whatever, somebody asks you, what is Unitarian Universalism? They don't know anything about the faith. What do you answer in as little time as it takes for the elevator to get to the next floor? So in 1 or 2 sentences. Go, and then I'll let you go and answer that, Reverend Sarah. Oh, and image description.
Okay, so I have 2 answers to this question. I have 2 elevator pitches, and I think all of us do. So one of them is, what information is this person looking for? And the other one is, what information do I want them to have? And I think often our elevator pitches default to the what information we want them to have, and what information they actually glean from that is that Unitarian Universalists are insufferable. So I try now to default to the information that they want to have. So I'm a hospital chaplain, and sometimes a patient or their family will ask, "Chaplain, what religion are you?" And I'll say, "I'm a Unitarian Universalist, but I serve everyone. It doesn't really matter," which is not technically true. It does matter very much to me, but it doesn't matter in that moment. And the way I live out and demonstrate Unitarian Universalism is by not answering with the insufferable theological answer. Sometimes a staff person, like a nurse or a doctor, will say, "Chaplain, what's Unitarian Universalism?" And in that case, I give them the information they are looking for, which is, oh, it's a religion. And I know that we argue internally about that, but that's not what they're looking for, right? That nuanced debate. Oh, it's a religion. It's one of the smaller ones. We used to be Christian, but we kind of branched off from them a long time ago. But we do go to church on Sundays, and we have choirs and stuff, so you'd recognize that. But we don't believe Jesus is the Son of God, and we don't believe in hell. I mean, in fact, a lot of UUs don't really believe in God, but that's not what's important. We have a lot of emphasis on things like social justice because we really care about all people being free. So that's what we do. I feel like Emerson would roll over in his grave if he heard that. But does that do Unitarian Universalism justice? I don't know. If I'm at a bar and someone hears that I'm a UU and says, "What's that?" I will just say, "Oh, it's a religion, a little one." And they'll go back to their beer and they'll be fine with that, right? They don't want to know more. But if the situation is, I'm talking to an acquaintance and they say, "Oh, that's not like a real religion, right? Because you guys don't believe in God. That's not like a religion. At that point, I'm switching over from what they want to know to what I want them to know. And if we were in an elevator, we would not get off. It's closed door, And that's a very different answer. And in that case, we are going into theology, or we are talking at that point about how we are a radically Protestant post-Christian faith based in liberation. And yes, so those are the 2 answers. And I think both of them you can shorten or lengthen depending on context and what is called for.
And now I'm like, how do we answer that? How do we follow that up?
Oh, well, image description. Would you like me to do an image description?
Yes, I would love you to do an image description. And
to clarify, this is for our listeners or viewers who are not watching on video or who are blind. Okay. I'm a white woman with dark hair in a bun, sitting in her home office, wearing glasses and a hoodie, with a chalice behind me, the famous TJ Maxx chalice that a bunch of us bought all at once and just cleared them out in a single day, and they probably have no idea why.
We're like, that was so good. We should do that again. That was popular. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that sufficient? If you'd like to add to my image description, please do.
I feel good. I feel good about that. I feel like that's where I just want, to give a sense of the information that is here. All right. Well, I'm also a white person. I have red hair that's up in a bun. I have a bulletin board behind me with a lot of things, and I'm wearing sort of a collared shirt, an earring, and an eyebrow piercing. Yeah, I'm like, I love your answer. And I'm like, so my answer to the question of what my elevator pitch was, I think is a lot less like, anyway, I was thinking about the way it's changed over the years. And I've given sort of different theological answers to that based on different points in my life. And I feel like my answer right now is sort of centering like, we're a religion that centers relationships with love as our central sort of core binding tenet, or our central theological foundation. That's what I got for it.
They're both really good. I have a blue shirt on today. I'm the only one with my hair is long and it's down on my shoulders. I have glasses and earrings, dark brown hair. And behind me, you can see my bookshelf, and Elmo is visiting this week. So Elmo is on my bookshelf. And my elevator pitch, because that's a really interesting question, Reverend Sarah, though, about what people want and what I want to talk about with them. Because I find the question comes up a lot, and I default to Reverend Sophia Betancourt's answer. I saw a video with her, and she said, our faith is the faith that says you are loved, all are worthy of love, and you do not do this alone. And I can remember those 3 points, and I can say those in an elevator when I am confronted with people. The rest of it gets really big and squishy and hard to articulate. So I just default to what Reverend Sophia said.
I love that. And I'm curious, I'm excited to get into more of the theology and more of the what is this thing a little bit later. But to pull us into that, I wanted to do a chalice lighting. So Jamelia will light our chalice. Before we do that, clearly I need this, do a little bit of grounding. So this is just a second to feel your feet on the floor or wherever they are, to ground into the actual location you are right now. That's feet on the floor, looking around you. What are you sensing, seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, smelling? What is around you, and can you just ground into that? And then take a big breath in and out. And arrive in the space together. And now I will do the chalice lighting, which is, we return to love again and again and again. We value what is true. We honor holiness. We try and we grow and we fail and we rest and we try. We are here together now. We need one another. We covenant. And so I did, to start, this is moving into sort of big discussion time, and I did want to start us just to talk about our question for this week, which is, to what are we bound? And that comes out of this section of the report, which has my favorite quote from the report, which is, the word religion comes from the same base as the word ligament, something that binds together. To be religious is to be clear about what you are bound to in the way that a ligament holds muscle to the bone. That's where this question arises out of, is, to what is Unitarian Universalism bound? To what are Unitarian Universalists bound? Yeah.
So I think to some extent, the entire Widening the Circle report is about that. To what are we bound? And it also describes a conflict right now in our denomination over to what we are bound, right? So there's this fantastic quote at the beginning of the theology chapter that, if I could have underlined more than twice, I would have, from Reverend Earl Holt, about this fear of clarity in our religion, right? In our culture anyway, that the fear of articulating that sort of thing, right, to what we are bound, that it would threaten the integrity or right of conscience of any individual. And so we often shy away from that, describing to what we are bound. But I can say when I first joined a Unitarian Universalist church, signing the book, right, that big old like dusty book that went back to the 1700s, right, where they used to write it in a quill pen, and covenanting it in front of all these people with them was very religiously meaningful to me, because it meant that I could no longer do, at least to me, whatever the heck I wanted without thinking about it. And I didn't feel that that was religiously constraining. There's something freeing about naming your obligations to this group. Yes, so for me, the idea of being like repeatedly bound to return to your obligations, to your commitments, to your promises, that's religiously meaningful to me. And I recognize that to a not insignificant minority of Unitarian Universalists, that's actually quite threatening. And for me, theologically, what that brings up is, what is it that they're really worshiping? And that question is not to write off the legitimacy of that worship, right? I can think of a universe, I can think of worlds in which worshiping your own desires, worshiping your own autonomy is a legitimate, right, religious belief. And it's certainly one that's not widely practiced in Unitarian Universalism, but noticeably practiced. It's why we have a chapter about this, right? In some cases, I think it stems from that, it's not even an undercurrent, the current of white supremacy in our religion, or it comes from the same sort of place. At least among American Unitarian Universalists, there's also this strong capitalist consumerist impulse that has taught people through no fault of their own, right? Taught especially white people that they have a right to demand exactly what they want, only what they want, and get it, or they're going to yank their money. And at a Walmart, that's in the form of their purchases, but at our churches, that's in the form of their pledges, right? That if the minister does not give me theologically what I want to hear about myself, I will yank my pledge and leave. And that has put us in such a tough spot in ways that come up in this report again and again. Do you have any questions at this point? I just said a lot of stuff.
I'm curious if you'll go more into that tension of when we say bound to something, a lot of us feel bound, right? A lot of us feel hand bound. And how is that actually binding us to these ideas or to these things is liberating or freeing? Can you explore that tension?
Yeah, so for one thing, I think it's, should I say the word wrong? I'll say it's a misconception to believe that being utterly free from obligations is itself the ultimate freedom, because at that point you're just adrift. And I think we have congregants who want to be in community and be supported. That's a very human desire, right? Supported and loved and encouraged and accompanied, right? In doing whatever the hell they want. And those two things are incompatible, right? And so those people wind up suffering greatly. So they are in no way liberated from the suffering of alienation and isolation when they insist on getting exactly what they want and wind up missing out on those genuine human connections, the genuine connections that come from giving up some part of your autonomy to the common good, right? I guess we could get into the tragedy of the comments here, but when everyone is doing only what they want, we all lose out. And there is a freedom that comes in committing yourself, right? Committing some part of yourself. It's like the cosmic potluck, right? If we all bring something, yes, we lose out on those casserole ingredients, but we also gain so much more by then entering into a much larger communion, if you will, right? So I am free at my home church in the sense that I am accepted in my frailties and my weaknesses. But what I have given up, the freedom I have given up in exchange for that, is that I am now obligated and committed to make it right when I mess up, when I hurt someone. I no longer have the freedom of saying, I don't give a damn, or they just need to get over that, right? I am no longer free to not care about whether or not I hurt other people. So we relinquish some freedoms, and I think gain so much more. At my home church, I think when I first joined as a young adult, that might have been the first time that I felt truly safe to just be like a flawed and imperfect human, like to roll into church half an hour late. I was a bartender at the time, so I'd like get to work at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Roll into church with like my eyeliner all smudged, and everyone was just happy to see me.
Yeah.
And the Ray Ligari, right, that the etymological sense of to what are we repeatedly bound? Was I bound to show up in my Sunday best, with a large pledge, on time, presentable? I was not, but I was bound to show up, wasn't I? And it was a sacrifice. I don't think we can have a meaningful connection with our religious communities without some kind of sacrifice. And I think that's what this significant minority of UUs is trying to get out of our religion. But this is a transaction, and there's no sacrifice on their part if it's something they purchase. There's this idea, I think, often unarticulated, about consuming church. When we get complaints about, the last couple sermons didn't really appeal to me. No one said they would. You didn't put your
Or they
money.
should. No one said they should.
No one said they should. You didn't put your money in the basket to buy a sermon that was entertaining or relevant to you.
Mm-hmm.
You are bound, like I said, to show up for your community and sit next to the person for whom that sermon was. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if the sermon is boring, to sit through it politely because you love your pastor and support them.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they were up late last night with a screaming 3-year-old, but you're going to go to coffee hour and join in that communion with your beloved community.
Mm-hmm.
And people will have seen your face one more week. So in some ways, we are freed from our own pettinesses.
Yeah.
When we agree to our religious obligations.
But hearing you say that made me think of a quote from Dr. Elias Ortega, and I can't remember if it was in the report or another thing. I think it was in this theology section, but he was talking about the inequality of sacrifice, like the fact that we ask some people to bear an incredible amount of sacrifice and some people to not. So I'd just be curious, because I'd be curious to hear you say more about that or hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, so that's a major point of widening the circle. And by the way, that idea about remaining in church when it feels like it isn't for you and committing to that sacrifice is an idea I learned from the Reverend Catherine Clarenbach, who's fantastic and wonderful. I just want to say that. So this lopsidedness of sacrifice and obligation, where do I even start? There's so much to be said about it. I think one form of privilege, and specifically white privilege and white male privilege, that manifests in our churches is the tolerance for sacrifice and obligation. So in the vignettes in Widening the Circle of Concern, we see repeatedly people of color, for instance, being asked to do more for the benefit of their white fellow church members, right? Like to serve more, to sacrifice their time and energy on the altar of diversity, not because their white fellow church members are going to follow their leadership, but to make their white fellow church members feel better about the racism of this church. And that is a kind of repeated crucifixion, right? And martyrdom that is not okay. Meanwhile, we ask, our older white male humanist congregants to sit through one Kwanzaa service, and the church attendance that day drops. So I used to be an usher at my home church. I'm like, really? 40% of the church is missing from this service every December? How fragile is your sense of obligation? How unwilling are you to have a single thing not immediately serve all of your needs and be relevant to you, right? And this unwillingness to sacrifice or be obligated manifests in so many ways. So even little ones, right? Like, are you willing to be humble? When a beloved, vulnerable church member says to you, that thing you just said hurt me, are you willing to shut up and say, I'm sorry, right? Stop explaining yourself and listen to them. Or is that too much of an obligation, right? Because we have a number of Unitarian Universalists who would rather die on the hill of, that wasn't my intention. Okay, so to what are they bound? What is it that they are worshiping? What is it that they are honoring and, repeatedly reinforcing? So there is, I think, oh my gosh, every time I hear some version of the marginalized people in our communities just need to be more understanding, right? They need to practice the humility. They need to practice forgiveness. They need to be patient. They need to teach us. They need to explain more, right? I think that's what what Dr. Elias is talking about in the lopsided nature of who winds up owing more in terms of obligations. When do the marginalized members of our community get to show up to church and be served and roll in half an hour late and feeling lazy and not bring something to the potluck? Is there a place for them to do that? Why not? If not, right?
Yeah, it makes me think of something I was talking to somebody about, like sometimes feeling like I'm like holding Unitarian Universalism with like the strength of my teeth, like gripping with my like in that sense of I would say, yeah, you show up on Sunday because it's Sunday. I've never really understood the like reading the sermon. Like you do it because that's your community. That wasn't a question. Yeah, I mean it. I guess here's the question in that is like there's these different theologies at play, right? I mean, and there's sort of the theological diversity we talk about in terms of, believing in humanism or Christian Unitarian Universalists or Jewish Unitarian Universalists or Hindu Unitarian Universalists, right? Like sort of different theologies in the sense of different coming out of different religious traditions, being bound also to different religious traditions. And we're also talking about there's this theological diversity in Unitarian Universalism that is about what is Unitarian Universalism bound to? Like, what are Unitarian Universalists bound to? And finding our core unity. Like, what does that leave us with? I guess.
Yeah. So, what does theological diversity in the context of our churches really mean? Because I think there are some people who think theological diversity means that we can believe whatever we want and act upon it and not be challenged. And part of living in community is that sometimes you are going to get called on your actions, right? When they are not compatible with community. And then I think if we're being ethical and if we have intellectual integrity, at that point, we are obligated to reevaluate the beliefs that drove us to do that thing, right? Our thoughtlessnesses and our self-centeredness, right? So if a person comes to our churches thinking that they can believe whatever they want and they can be fully self-centered and self-absorbed, and then they act out of those beliefs in church, I have personally witnessed a lot of people get upset and offended at being called on their nonsense. And it's not just, a pure selfishness. There's like a theological upset behind that, right? Like, I was promised that my inherent worth and dignity means I can do whatever I want. And weren't they? Did they not get that impression because we, as a faith movement, have been so reluctant to clearly articulate the things that we actually do believe in? There's a difference between shying away from dogmas and creeds and just not believing anything. And it is not true that Unitarian Universalists can believe anything they want or that we believe nothing. So occasionally I've heard Unitarian Universalism is the religion that believes in all religions. How in God's name, no pun intended, could that be true? The very reason why I am a Unitarian Universalist is because I am not a Christian, I am not a Muslim, I am not a Buddhist, right? Although I appreciate things from all of those faiths. And it is also not true that we are simply a mashup of all faiths, which is incredibly reductive and insulting to all of those faiths. I don't think it's epistemologically true that everything can be true all at once. And I don't believe that. And I don't think our faith teaches that. But when people come away with the impression of any of those things, we are setting ourselves up as a faith movement for these kinds of theologically driven emotional conflicts between people that wind up playing out at coffee hour. Like, well, you can't tell me what my truth is. My truth is, and then they say something racist, right? Well, can't we? Aren't we here to talk and, have this, it's a living tradition, but also a living dialogue with one another? And if there's any kind of, binding and obligation to this relationship, you can't just say, I'm not going to talk about that with you, and then go home to your tower of righteousness, right? It's a kind of a shared tower. We're all building it together.
And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about, we congregation I'm serving now, we've had some conflict that's come out in behavior, and we have this like every day, every meeting we have, we're like, every person is welcome. All people are welcome. All behaviors are not.
Yes.
And so we have that added difficulty of saying, there are nuances both in theology, there are not nuances in these behaviors, and these behaviors are not welcome in community. You cannot be in community and do these behaviors. So we also can't articulate that very well either. And I feel like there's a bridge there between not knowing what our theology is and not being able to say these behaviors we don't accept either.
Yeah. So I subscribe to the idea, the religious education idea, that Sunday school is everything that happens at church for everyone of all ages. And what we say is often not as important as what we do. And we can, a lot of our churches have picked up on that phrase, right? That all people are welcome, all behaviors are not. But what do people actually see, right? When we talk about in church being anti-racist, and we allow endless discussions about, is this church really racist? Is white supremacy real? What does that teach people about what is important to this church? Stalling, not doing anything, not addressing anything. And in those moments, our values and ideals that we say in our words do not line up with what we're doing. I mean, part of, one of the recommendations at the end of the theology chapter in Widening the Circle is about clearly articulating things, right? In terms of our theology. And this is in italics, not all of these are. It's bolded and italicized. The recommendation, acknowledgement of anti-oppression work as a theological mandate, right? This is not a book club that we're having because we thought Ibram X. Kendi is an especially good writer, right? Although he is. A theological mandate is essential. This is essential to our churches, to our progress. So there's the articulation, and then there's the living it out. So we can't just keep having, endless bad faith debates. That's not a living tradition, that's a stalled tradition.
That's not a living tradition. That's a stalled tradition. I love that. There's something. Yeah.
I think I can add to that. That what I've noticed, in some of my beloved fellow church members of the humanist tradition, is a lifting up of debate as a kind of theology and a theological good, that even though we might not say this out loud, wow, articulation has really become a theme for this conversation. Even though we might not say this out loud, that the act of debate is one of the highest forms of religious engagement that we can do, right? And that endless debate is cosmically like the point of us being here. As long as we're alive, we can be arguing about this. But not everyone in our churches wants to do that. I think most of us don't at this point. And I appreciate a good theological debate, right? But not at the expense of people's humanity or feelings. Like the moment someone around me in church tells me that they're upset, like stop, right? I stop, because that person, that relationship, that covenant is more important to me than this activity. I think a lot, I have a background in linguistics, so I was very influenced by speech acts theory and the idea that every act of speaking does something, right? And this is very obvious, like in wedding ceremonies, when we say, I pronounce you married, it is the act of speaking that does that, right? Arguably, every act of speaking does something. And when we engage in these debates, right, the debates that are going on right now over, like, is the eighth principle too wordy? What is performed by that act of speaking? And context is very important, right? Because if we yell fire in a crowded theater, I'm sorry to fall back on that like very cliched example, and there is no fire, what is performed? We're performing a kind of act of terrorism and endangering people. But if you say the same words, right, if you say the same thing, if you yell fire in a crowded theater and there is a fire, then you are performing the action of saving people, right? So context is everything. So when I hear, God help me for bringing this up, the gadflies proposing, like, I'm just asking questions. I just want to know why widening the circle of concern was not peer reviewed. I'm just asking. Are they really asking? Because I hear what their words are saying. I speak English, I understand it, but I also see what their action is doing, right? And we have often, at every level of our religious movement, from churches to regions to the whole, right, denomination, we have these conversations about what is racist, and we have the people most invested in preserving racism and white supremacy arguing, I never said a racist thing. Really? Because everything you did perpetuated racism. Are we talking about the words you used, or what it is that you're doing in this church, what it is you're lifting up? And if all of your actions in this church, in this religious context, are lifting up your right as a white person to never be challenged, to do whatever you want, to only be presented with things you agree with, I really do question if your sense of the divine aligns with that we have as a religious movement as a whole, and whether or not this religion is the right place for you. Because it is not true that you can worship any God at a Unitarian Universalist church. Least of all, I think, maybe not least of all, but lower on the ladder of acceptable gods is yourself. I guess I could always think of a worse God. So someone could always email you and be like, well, actually.
Yeah.
It's an ever-present threat.
Uh-huh. I'm noticing our time, Sky. I wonder if there are any other questions you want to be sure to ask.
I have the one question I think we didn't get to, which I don't know if we're gonna do this in like just a few minutes though. But, is this like, what is, well, maybe we covered this, like this, what is, I'm thinking like eschatology, like not the, like the end goal, but like, or maybe that's not eschatology, my brain. Anyway, but like the, like not quite like what is the end goal? Because I'm not sure we're in like a religion that's like end times, but like what is beloved community? What is the kingdom of God? What is you know, like heaven on earth, like because we have this idea of heaven on earth. So it's not necessarily the end of everything, but we have this theological idea, I think, of a certain type of community. Yeah. So I like, what is that? What is that thing? That's that theological thing.
Okay, so I'm somewhat suspicious of the idea that Unitarian Universalism is somewhere far in the unreachable future and we're just not there yet, right? And that we're all just, I know we're all learning and everyone's at like different stages of spiritual growth, emotional growth, right? Especially our white people at different stages of understanding with regard to oppression. But I am suspicious of the idea that, you know, it won't be within our lifetimes. Well, why not? Right? We are talking about multiple things, like the bringing about the larger kingdom of heaven on earth in an America that's now sliding pretty quickly towards a fascist dystopia. I'm pretty cynical about this. Not everyone is. I understand that that kingdom on earth might be pretty unreachable, but why not at coffee hour? Like, I just don't, you know, we have fantastic, creative, hilarious, brilliant, prophetic voices in Unitarian Universalism right now, right? We have ministers of color, transgender, disabled ministers whose congregations will not listen to them or respect them or accept them as leaders. They're happy to have them there as tokens, right? But here are people who are teaching and preaching how to bring about the kingdom at noon when this service ends and we all go get a cup of coffee and no one is listening. So I am somewhat suspicious of the idea that the eschatology of this faith is always somewhere further down the road when it could be happening right now. If we would perhaps re-adopt humility as a central religious practice for us. And not just humility of the marginalized, having to understand the privileged people in their congregations better and just practice this endless forgiveness, right? When will the privileged in our congregations adopt humility? That's when the kingdom will come about. Oh my God, I've talked too long.
Can I draw together a couple points that you've made over this
Yes.
time, Reverend Sarah? So you started by talking about signing the book at your home congregation.
Yes.
And the connection, the community, the transformation that you experienced in becoming a part of community that accepted you. You roll in Sunday morning with your full self, imperfect as we all are, and here you are accepted. And this tension of, in my religious educator's hat, part of what I think the beloved community is what they say, page 14 of the report. Continued learning and evolution should be the goal of all of us as Unitarian Universalists. In 2019, an understanding of our ordained ministry as learning, not learned, we moved from final to full fellowship, a positive change that acknowledged the often ignored truism that we all must evolve or die, right?
Yes.
So for me, the beloved community is that community that accepts that I'm a learning and failed individual and I'm welcome here no matter what.
Yeah.
And so that is beloved community. It's not that we're all going to be perfect about doing any one thing.
No.
But again, you're talking about that, having that humility to say that I am continually learning, you are continually learning, and we're going to do this together.
Right. And oh my gosh. So it's perfectly okay to say all this pronoun stuff is new to me and I'm getting it wrong. I'm trying, you know, it's tough. I understand that, right? What is not okay is to say it wasn't like that when I joined this church in 1973, so we can never change it and I refuse to learn. I think among our folks, especially our older justice-minded folks, they were at the forefront of justice in 1975, right? Or 1980. And like at the forefront, where like the line, the bleeding edge of what was new and exciting then. They stopped there, the line kept moving past them, and now they're back on the side of oppression and they refuse to accept it or to move. I understand that finding yourself on the wrong side of the line of justice can be pretty upsetting, right? No one in our denomination has ever been called a white supremacist, but I hear this all the time when we say that thing you just did or said, it's kind of reinforcing white supremacy, right? To find themselves on that line when they never were before. They weren't when they joined this church. They were the radical and the revolutionary. Yeah, that's upsetting. Yeah, it's hard to face that conception of yourself when your whole religious identity was built around, you know, I marched for gay rights when people were throwing rocks at us, right? Which does still happen, but why should I have to move to still be the exemplar of what is just? Well, because things change. Because things change, and all of us are always changing.
Mm-hmm.
That move that you talked about from, you know, which was in this chapter, from final fellowship to full fellowship, was hugely important. Some of the greatest pushback the eighth principle has gotten in our denomination has been from retired colleagues who don't think it's necessary because they graduated seminary, you know, in 1967, and this didn't exist then. Well, that was a problem, wasn't it? We had an entire empowerment controversy over this, right? So are you willing to grow and change as one of the obligations and commitments to this faith? I would hope so. The Reverend Tandy Rogers, who's just a fantastic education superstar, right? Introduced me to the idea of continuous religious education as an obligation. As an obligation of church membership. So many of our churches have, as a condition of membership, you have to make a financial contribution of record once a year, which I know some people don't like. I think it's really a matter of record keeping. Just give a penny so that this church still knows you're alive and your name's attached to that, right? In a symbolic way. It doesn't have to be that deep, but why not make a condition of continued membership in this church showing up to classes? You got to take one class a year, because once you have calcified or entrenched yourself in the belief that what you already believe is unchangeably right, how on earth will that set you up for later conflict with this community? It's just like, given my understanding of linear time and entropy, like it's bound to happen, right?
I think you're approaching though another conflict that we have in another problematic area, challenge, an area for growth is like that inherent. I think part of our distrust of theology is also that distrust of authority. And
yes.
So to say, I have to go to a class, somebody knows more than me, ain't nobody know more than me. Like there's a piece there of this distrust of, well, who's going to teach it? And also then you have to pay either more staff or somehow have this learning available, which again, we're not willing to put our funds towards. So there's this whole like morass of distrust of things, including distrust of people that are in care of our financial resources.
Oh my gosh. Jamili, all of that's amazing. And that could be an entire episode, the mistrust episode of this podcast. So for one thing, why is religious education funding always cut first, right? It's one of the first things to get cut when this church is in financial trouble, because anyone can be a religious educator, right? We'll just have some retired folks babysit these kids on Sunday, and then the RE program falls apart instantly, right? It turns out that our religious educators are religious professionals. They're professionals at what they do, right? Yep. They are specialized, and we should be valuing and compensating them fairly for what they do if we expect this program to be a success. Mm-hmm. And then there's this wider mistrust of all religious professionals, which I think stems from, let me back this up. There was a time in our faith movements, separate Unitarian and Universalist, this is how far back this goes, when to value the human experience was radical, right? That was a radical theological notion. I don't think it so much is anymore. It's pretty mainstream outside the walls of our church. But there are some people, and this is in this chapter actually, who hold up their individualized experience as the only theologically important source that we have. And with that comes an attendant rejection of expertise of our professionals. What I've noticed is that churches love their members that they send to seminary, right? Someone from this church went to seminary, they're going to be a fantastic minister. They love their interns because they can look down on them, right? Well, she's still learning, right? But we'll teach her. But they don't trust the clergy or the religious professionals that come to them from other churches, as if we just dropped out of the, out of a spaceship. Like, I'm a Unitarian Universalist too. I came up in this tradition too,
Well, and that's complicated by the fellowship movement that the chapter talks about too, and how this rejection of clergy, not just a distrust, but outright rejection. We don't need clergy.
Yes. And, I'm just spitballing here, but I do wonder if some of that is that the religious expertise of someone else feels like a threat to one's own, I guess, self-reverence. Well, I think there are people who are threatened by the suggestion that they could have anything left to learn. But I do want to note here that many of our folks have been grievously wounded. So from other faith traditions. So we have a lot of people who have come out of churches that preached a kind of damaging and false humility, right? So, oh gosh, should we even get into that? Let me just leave it at, many of our folks have been wounded in other traditions where they were taught that they could not be trusted and what they experienced did not matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they carry that wound for the rest of their religious lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not going to be told by a clergy person that they have anything to change or improve.
Well, and the generous side of me thinks how freeing and how healing it could have been for so many of them to encounter a faith tradition that says you are good and whole and holy in what you know, and keep learning. Right. If we'd been able to tack that part on and say you are good and whole and holy, your experiences are as they are, and let's bring them here, and keep learning.
Yes.
And we didn't do that. And two, I think the fellowship movement, the thing that's interesting, particularly down here in Southern Arizona, is they came particularly looking for educated college communities to plant in. Yes. And so this experience just this weekend of a fellowship hour it was all, it was 95% college faculty in this fellowship hour. It wasn't a huge fellowship hour,
Sure.
but 95% college faculty talking about their experiences. And I'm just stunned. I mean, it's quite the experience to hear them talk about and what they're interested in and talking about. And so I'm thinking, tying back to where this comes out of, is that's our community is a highly educated,
Yeah.
and potentially stuck.
Very. And so when, like I said, when I joined the church, I was a bartender. And at that time in Philadelphia, Power was just getting organized. That's Philadelphians organized for, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting now. But it was at that time, it was a religious coalition. I'm going to have to Google this. A religious coalition. And at that time, it was very focused on the rights of airport workers, right, at Philadelphia International Airport, who were struggling, and restaurant workers, the restaurant workers movement. And I remember these discussions, right, with all of these college professors at coffee hour about how we can help people in the service industry. I'm like, that's me. You're talking about me, and I'm standing here, right? And I think about that experience often when we talk about the plight of other marginalized people in America. How can we help the Black community? Okay, well, what is every Black person in this church supposed to think or feel during this conversation, right? What does that teach them? Again, everything that happens at church is a form of Sunday school. What lesson are they learning about what this church believes and who we are? And then when presented with the idea that those conversations are inherently marginalizing, why do so many of our folks then double down and re-entrench? I'll leave that there. Philadelphians organized to witness, empower, and rebuild. I just remembered. Yes, why is the sense of liberation in so many of our churches framed as something we are doing as an act of altruism to other people? As if our most privileged, wealthy, and educated church members are not also bound up in chains, right? There's this fantastic poem, I think it was by Taras Shevchenko, the Ukrainian poet, about an execution in which the political prisoner being executed turns to the executioner and says, "The chains that you forged today between us are such that not even you yourself will ever be able to break them." And when we talk about in our churches liberation as something we are doing to other people, right? When our people go to underprivileged schools to help read to the children, to help get them ahead, without analyzing, why are you in a position to volunteer to do this and the school is not in a position to hire more teachers? Right? When we don't examine the systems in which all of us are operating, when we don't examine our own complicity, right? Those of us who are privileged, not only do we not liberate other people, we wind up inhabiting a fantasy world where we've exonerated ourselves and feel good, and temporarily don't pay attention to the chains around our own ankles. It is not a cliche that until all of us are free, none of us are free. Just some of us have the luxury of ignoring it because we're comfortable. Some of us have the luxury of debating whether or not we really needed this report, right? Widening the circle. Is this necessary? Can we look into this further?
And as this current Great Resignation that's occurring now, it shows is that some of us not only don't have the luxury to ask whether it's necessary, some of us are losing our lives and our livelihoods over the reality that's happening today.
Yeah.
So that feels like a place to end. I will not
Okay.
qualify whether that is a good or bad place to end, but that feels like a place to end. And we like to end with an action, an invitation to go and do. And our invitation today is to go and do some discernment. However you discern, whether that's by yourself with a journal, with a trusted friend, with a minister, with another colleague, and see if you can come up with your own elevator pitch. What's your theology? How would you articulate UU theology? So when somebody asks you, Unitarian Universalism, what's that? You have an answer. So there's your invitation for this episode. And as we wrap up, I invite you to go in peace, go in power, go do good in the world, and go knowing that you are loved.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And blessed be. We'd like to say a few thank yous here at the end of the podcast. Thank you first to our guest, Reverend Sarah Skotchko. Thank you for being with us and for sharing all of your amazing wisdom with all of us. Thank you, as always, to Unitarian Universalist Justice Arizona, or UU Jazz, especially to Janine Gelsinger and Phoebe Dubich. And finally, thank you all for being with us. As a reminder, you can contact us at uusacredstory@gmail.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.